All right, we got everybody here. First thing on the agenda is I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Hernandez, seconded by Judge Katie. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next item is presentation and adoption of the District Defender Compensation Plan. Does the committee wish to make a presentation? I know y'all gave us a handout just now. I think they have the committee listed as first to go. I don't know how we want to proceed. Doesn't matter to me. Is the committee going to make a presentation?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. The handout that you have before you is essentially, it starts off with an introduction of some of the issues or maybe questions that we addressed in the committee meetings. There were 2 committee meetings that were held to discuss possible options for amending or completely changing the current compensation plan. And the first time we met was on July 24th. The second time we met was September the 20th. This is a result of these meetings. So the first half of it is basically the first 2 pages addresses A through E, through letter E, some of the points that were just brought up in respect to the proposed plan by the state office. Just to kind of go over some of the things that we have listed here. The current plan that we have and the current compensation plan was passed last year, or approved by the previous board last year. And it was passed in consideration of providing stability and security for the chiefs. That's the first point that we wanted to make sure. Some of the other things that were considered, the plan was done with a lot of variables in mind, and some of these variables or criteria, I should say, are addressed here. Particularly, it was approximately 30 variables, give or take a few. And if we turn over to the second page, one of the biggest points of question or issues we found with the state plan, the proposed plan currently, is that there are a couple of elements that are still a work in progress. And so not an issue in terms of something that couldn't be resolved, but we thought we would address specifically what those undefined criteria
Did he vote?
Hello? Yes, there we go.
When I see red and green are back.
I know.
Green ought to be go and red ought to be stop. We all learn that.
We agree, we agree. Okay, so the first main point was just addressing the caseload matter and the impact, pros and cons for each particular chief. Now, every chief was not present at one or both of the committee meetings to really give any input. There was a small number that represented the chiefs, but again, this is why the survey was sent out to get the input of their particular concerns about the proposed plan. Letter B then addresses there's a sliding scale to increase chiefs' compensation if, which is a contingency, if the local government or governing authority contributes to the public defender's office, such as in the case of providing office space. Office space, I think, directly impacts a handful of chiefs at this point where maybe they are paying rent for a building, maybe they're renting a building from someone else, are they getting compensation or reimbursement back from the state? It was a question, it was a point, it was another issue. But again, this is a variable that doesn't directly impact every chief in the same way. So this was the second point of kind of subjective criteria that we found or we thought to be a point of discussion for the committee. C, if a chief receives a supplement to their compensation as a result of an appropriation from the local government, the question then remains whether the chief will lose that increase if the local funding is not renewed the following year. So this point was discussed again at to a very extreme degree simply because it's so subjective. There are a lot of districts we found, and I think we knew this before we started meeting, that they're under-resourced in general because they're associated with parishes that have low funding. And the reality of whether or not money would ever be available, let alone it's available one year and then not available the next year, was very real for a lot of our rural parishes, which is where a lot of the a large number of districts are covering, I should say. So that being a subjective criteria was a point of concern because technically it's nothing that you could rely on. You can't assume it's going to happen every year, and in some instances it's not even plausible to ask. These chiefs have already asked for it, which is one of the points that was made. Chiefs have asked for money from local funding, they've been denied, and they basically don't expect it to ever be granted. And so for those districts that have large amount of funding or even a nominal amount of funding currently, or even with the potential of having it, those numbers aren't very large is what we found. They're a more narrow percentage of the chiefs who actually have that as a viable option. So that was a point of concern with the proposed plan. If we go to letter D, the office's proposed plan provides that the chief receive no credit for time served as a line defender. This point came up in the meetings, but it also came up in the surveys as unsolicited. Some of the chiefs commented that it would be nice to get credit for having essentially done the groundwork to become a chief. It's important to have a chief who really understands the ins and outs of the job. Not just any lawyer can do this. Certainly, I'm a private attorney. I don't know that I could just jump into a chief position. I've never worked as a line defender. But the point being that with that variable not being considered, it was a point of concern or a point of issue for a lot of the chief defenders. And again, this was a variable that was previously factored into the current compensation plan. Letter E, the office's proposed plan includes criteria that's affecting salaries outside of the chief's control, such as civil fines and user fees based upon fees imposed by the courts and physical appropriations by the local government to subsidize the public defender program. Despite their best efforts, chiefs have no control over assessment, collection, or appropriation of these fees. So this also goes back to another point, earlier point that I brought up, in a sense that, again, a lot of these districts are differently situated from each other. If you're not in a district that's, let's say, I could take New Orleans as a great example, even Baton Rouge, you have a larger population of persons that you're serving, you have i.e., therefore, a larger opportunity to collect a larger amount of fees. But what about these more rural areas, these districts that are covering communities that, it's maybe a smaller number of clients, but also communities that are just not as financially situated as some of these larger cities. So again, it's another criteria that becomes a little more subjective, and in a way, when you look at some of the criteria of the proposed plan, I don't want to say it's not like a punishment necessarily, but it becomes a negative impact if you don't have the affirmative presence of some of the criteria that's listed to be considered for compensation, right? And particularly things that you cannot control, like your population size or your local government's financial stability or its viability, right? And so those were some issues that were discussed greatly. We also note that this criteria rewards chiefs in more affluent districts, and another caveat to that is it also awards chiefs who maybe came into a very nice situation that they actually had no direct impact in creating in terms of the financial stability of that district. Perhaps their predecessor was the one who was able to garner maybe local funding and et cetera. And then now you have a chief who's taken over that position, and they're benefiting salary-wise. Their salary gets increased based off of the work of someone else, which isn't really isn't a problem, except for the fact that it's not a balanced criteria in terms of everyone having that same benefit and opportunity. So then I'll go to the next page, page 3. The fifth note that we have, the office's plan provides for a very low threshold or warrant as it's termed in the proposed plan, which would be enticing to applicants in the median district as opposed to the base warrant provided for in the current plan. Then we go, well, warrant, for one, there was a little bit of discussion about warrant and how it was defined in the proposed plan, and whether or not, it was a criteria that was objective enough, I should say. Number 6, the office's proposed plan ranges from $75,000 to $187,000. The current plan provides for compensation ranging from $80,000 to $160,000. The chart, again, that was sent out by the state with the green column that gives you the amount of how much the salaries would increase, or in some cases, I think it might have gone down a little bit, but increase if you take a 25% caseload. When you compare it to the current salaries, the column that's highlighted in yellow at the top, the majority of those salaries, of the current salaries, if they do not take, the chief does not take a 25% caseload, however that may be defined, is going to be decreased significantly. And although the green column it reflects some very nice inflations in salaries if these chiefs were to take on this caseload. The fact is, again, that a lot of the chiefs, even based off of the survey, indicated that this would be a burden to them, that they would not be able to, or that they already have a caseload. And so what is that going to even be considered is it going to be considered in terms of meeting this definition of caseload? But of course, we still don't really know quite what caseload means, what the definition is. And so if you look at the disparity between the current salaries and the number in the green column, it's pretty big. Some of the disparities range as low as like maybe a 5,000 difference, but there's some that are like 20,000 and 40,000 difference, and 31,000 difference. I mean, it's a huge gap. But even if you look at the column of the proposed plan's base salary against the current salary, I think we discussed in the last meeting, well, there were questions, I should say, at the last meeting, which prompted this committee to being formed. The question was whether or not anyone's salary was going to be reduced by the plan, and I believe the response was no. But when we look even at this chart, and I don't want to misquote anyone, but if you look at the chart, you see very clearly that the salaries, some of them go down very significantly, even if it's just to 5,000, but there are some that are decreased even more, and this is just considering the base amount if this proposed plan were accepted. And so there would, in fact, be a decrease in chief's salaries for a lot of persons. And so that was a point of concern. So again, it's one of the things of the proposed plan which concerns some people, and it also prompted a question for me personally: how many chiefs would remain in their position if their salary went down? Could you afford it? There were several, I can't remember the exact number, but there were several chiefs who said that they would not be able to. They know that they would retire, quote unquote retire, but also there are some that they would have to leave their position within a year or two, let's put it that way, if their salary was decreased. So the whole point of the current compensation plan and all of the variables in the planning to get to this point was so that chiefs can make a livable earning wage, right? And that they could have salaries that reflect increases, that reflect cost of living increase and a lot of other variables, at least 30 variables. And so to have the proposed plan take that salary base and bring it down was a point of concern. Number 7, the office's proposed plan would result in 19 chiefs incurring a cut in pay, with the largest cut being $52,500, and an increase in pay for 17 chiefs by as much as $47.8 thousand. So 3 chiefs have reported, and there's the statistic, that they would have to resign if the office's plan were adopted, and 4 said that they would resign within the next few years based upon eligible for retirement. It was definitely expressed in the committee meetings that there were some chiefs who they would open a private practice, to kind of balance out, because of course now they have the ability to do that, but they've never been in private practice before. And they don't even really know how that would impact their ability to perform their job as a chief if they had to do that. But they would open it just because they would have to in order to financially survive. Number 5. The office's proposed plan allows for and encourages part-time legal practice away from duties and responsibilities of the chief. The current plan allows for an additional $20,000 per year as an incentive for chiefs to devote their full time to their position as chief. The office's proposed plan allows for and encourages a part-time legal practice away from the duties and responsibilities of the chief. So we had again, a very extensive conversation about this and what this means, right? What this means in real life. We know as public defenders, and I'll say this on behalf of the committee, that it's sometimes a job that's a little more difficult if you compare it to maybe the DA's office or ADs who have like definitive, stable funds coming in and resources available. And so as a public defender, a lot of times you're working with resources that perhaps don't meet your need. And with this proposed plan, the question came up just in terms of, if we open a private practice and we have to now dedicate some of our time to our own personal cases, one, you also have to consider the conflict issue, right? You're in a district, there's only so many people, and is there ever going to be a conflict in terms of cases that are arising from clients that you have as a public defender, and are you in a posture to really turn down those cases? Because the community is small anyway, and you still need to supplement your income essentially as a chief chief defender by having this private practice. So the potential of conflict came up as a point of conversation, as well as is there time to do all this? So a lot of the public defenders were expressing that they are very tasked very well in terms of their hours. It's not a matter of I have a lot of extra time on my hand to perform my job. And so now you're asking with the proposed plan, it basically puts a lot of these chiefs in a posture where they have to pick up a private practice, and it will take away from the time that they're able to dedicate to their full-time job as a chief. So that was a point of concern. And so then we move on to number 6, which is a comparison of the 2 plans as proposed. One of the issues that was always brought up even with the previous board in terms of what type of compensation plan to consider and adopt was the cost of it. And so the committee took the time to kind of compare or make some propositions based off of both plans, and we looked at the cost impact, right? Is it more pricey to just make a couple of amendments to the current compensation plan? Is the proposed plan going to cost more in the long run than the compensation plan? And is it going to cost more as a base, based on the base salaries, or is it going to cost more based off of the additional caseload that's being picked up? So we came to a conclusion, and so our recommendations are as follows. Number one, the subsequent increases in the salaries of the district public defenders be equal to any increases in the salary provided to state civil employees and implemented within the same time frame as that legislation provides. This first suggestion or recommendation was brought up because it seemed we had a conversation about what other similarly situated or other types of state employees might provide a good salary increase guide that would not be offensive in terms of potential cost or even like the frequency of it. We know that the state office salaries to some degree are, at least the state defenders, it coincides with that of the Supreme Court justices. And so we thought it made sense to go ahead and kind of have the chief defenders, their salary movement, and when the salaries increase, kind of mirror other civil service employees. Although they're not civil service employees, it is, we thought, a very realistic point of comparison. It's not something that is brand new concept, and it's obviously well enjoyed by all state employees. So that was our first recommendation, to implement the same time frame so that we're not in a position that we were in before, where a lot of chiefs served for many years, did not see a salary increase, and basically each one had to come, I guess, before the board or ask for an increase, on their own pace or what have you. Number two, the second recommendation, that the compensation of those district public defenders who serve over multiple districts be prorated and paid from the funds of each district based upon a formula agreed upon with the executive staff. Now, the current compensation plan is always based and has always been based on available monies in that district. It's never been a point of automatic salary increase regardless of whether you can afford it or not. And so this point was made, this recommendation was made to kind of further clarify that point, but also giving the discretion for the executive staff to negotiate some of these prorated amounts. Because they generally are contracting. Currently, the conversations are had with the state defender to determine these things anyway. And we thought that would be a fair option. So our third recommendation, that the $20,000 increase in compensation for full chiefs be reduced to $12,000 per year. This recommendation was made with the consideration of, again, not making the compensation plan as it currently stands be more expensive as a proposed plan, but also to kind of offset how do I term it, to offset the impression of it just being, I guess, money just kind of tossed out there, if that was ever a point of consideration or a point that was made by anyone. The decrease was to really reflect still the desire to kind of provide almost like I don't want to say a reward for losing my words here. I'm trying to remember. Not a reward for the basis of what the $20,000 increase was originally for, but it's to still allow like a supplemental percentage for the district, for the defenders to obtain. Number four, the term of the contract entered into between the state public defender and the district public defenders be extended from 1 year to 5 years in contemplation of the statute as cited, which you'll also see in the footnote. That particular part of the statute is quoted, but also you've received a copy of the statute in its full body and form. To include a provision that termination or non-renewal of any current or future contract must be for cause with termination or non-renewal, not becoming effective until reviewed by the Louisiana Public Defender Oversight Board and a vote of the majority of the board as to whether that decision should be affirmed or reversed. This particular part of the statute, 15 Section 161A, it's the one part of the amended or the recreated act that happened as a result of the last, I think, the special legislative session, right? That still gives the opportunity for contracts to be entered into for up to 5 years with the public defender chiefs. And you note, if you looked at the act before, I mean, if you look at the other parts of the act, there are these statements or caveats that always say it's a 1-year contract, et cetera, but there's still this portion that still remains that was not changed in that particular legislative session earlier this year. And so it's always been a point where the board has had to entertain any concerns or issues with chiefs that were brought before the board. And this is not a new point that's added here as a part of this number 4 recommendation. It's just a reiteration of the board having the ability to hear what issues the state office has with these district chiefs. And if there is a warrant to relieve them of their duties, as opposed to it being a very subjective decision just made by the state office. It's really a recommendation of reiteration of a point that was already a matter for the board to consider prior to, this new creation of the oversight board. So it's essentially up to the board to, agree that this is a point that needs to be reminded of and included in anything that's approved today. Number 5, the 5th recommendation is that the current chief salaries are grandfathered in without a reduction. And that last recommendation comes again as on the heels of the questions that were made by 3 board members at our last meeting about salaries being decreased. And it also came up again and is made here as a final recommendation because it's a concern. It is obviously a concern of the surveyed district chiefs. It's a realistic concern, and it was a concern of the committee that they not suffer money's loss. Now, I also want to make the point that under the current compensation plan, not all of the district chiefs accepted any sort of salary increase that was proposed by the current plan. There are quite a few that made their decision not to do that, and they kept the salary they had before the current compensation plan was put in place. And I personally expect that the same thing would happen if it met 4 salary increases. But the point being that for those that had a large increase in their salaries for various reasons, reasons like they just never had a salary increase over years. There was one person I know in particular, I think it had been 10 years since they had experienced any sort of salary increase, but still expected to perform the job to the best of their ability, right? And so the committee really felt that it would be a hard pill to swallow to have to see any of these districts chiefs have their current salary be reduced with an approval of the proposed plan. So that's a summary of what we covered in the committee and our recommendations. Any questions?
What I just press this?
As far as I know.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to commend the committee for the good work that it's done. I think it's a very comprehensive review of the proposal. I had an opportunity to sit with the executive director yesterday, as well as after which I spoke with several of the district directors about their particular position. So after meeting with Director Stearns and then with meeting with those district directors, I kind of walked away in my mind that number 5 was very, very important. I commend Mr. Stearns also for the hard work that he's done in order to try to put together a compensation plan. Compensation plans, in my estimation, is always perspective going forward. And the plan put forth is kind of like a hybrid plan, partially prospective and partially retroactive. The retroactive part is the dealing with the current chief's salary. So that's when after I met with the district directors, I really thought that it would be hard for me to see anybody's salaries cut at this particular juncture. But the prospective nature, of the director's plan, you really need to be taken into consideration. How things should happen, later on down the line. But at this particular juncture, I don't think anybody's salary should be cut. On number 3, in your recommendation, the $20,000 increase in compensation for full-time chiefs to be reduced to $12,000. Are you suggesting that this is automatic every year?
Yes, so
Pardon?
the mic, oh, there we go, okay. So currently, the $20,000 is offered as a compensation if you take on extra. I think the point was if you add a private practice, so it's Lani-op, right? But instead of the full 20, reduce it down to 12,000, and it's not. I don't think it's an annual increase. I don't think that's currently how it's situated. I think it's a. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
It's
not a private practice.
right.
Line defenders caseload.
No.
Caseload.
The 20,000 is to encourage them to be full-time chiefs.
Right. It's still, so that was the point that we were speaking about at the committee meeting. It was, so the 20,000 under the proposed plan is for if you choose to pick up a private practice, right? That's an incentive to do that. But 20,000 if you do not pick up the private plan? I mean, a private practice? I'm getting confused. Right, but I'm talking about the proposed plan. So proposed plan, you get an additional 20,000
If you don't take it.
if you don't take the private practice? Yeah, good. I was going to bring up the proposed plan's status and then ours.
With all these issues, let me just deal with that one. In the plan that we have now, if a chief is full-time and does not have a private practice, their salary is increased by $20,000 per year. If next year they decide to take a private practice, they don't get that $20,000. If they continue to be full-time, they get the $20,000 every year. It's not cumulative. It's just a supplement to their salary. This proposal was simply to reduce the $20,000 supplement down to $12,000 as sort of a budget-saving component to it, and what it would be incentive for them to still remain full-time chiefs as opposed to going into a part-time practice in addition to their responsibilities. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. Kind of. So we're talking about where these persons would reveal whether or not they will opt for a reduction because they're going into private practice, or they will maintain the extra compensation because they're not. So this is based on an annual review.
Yes, sir, and in the past, our recollection is that they reported whether or not they had a private practice before we ever had this come. So as part of their annual reporting, yes, I do have a private practice, no, I don't. So now you report once a year, I do, I don't. If you don't and you want to be a full-time chief, many of these folks in larger districts, their responsibilities are such they can't have a private practice, so they're not going to have it. Others have the option of saying, it's more lucrative for me to have a private practice than take the $20,000, now 12. So we just reduced that number down. We didn't change the criteria for it changing annually if they opted in or out. Does better answer?
Yeah.
Thank you, Judge.
So, I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you all very much. You clearly put a lot of work and thought into this. I do wish I had this earlier. It's very complicated, and even in the plan that you're presenting, there are a lot of lingering questions, which you've admitted. So. Understanding the complications. So one question I have is under the committee's proposed plan. It looks like you're calling for an increase of $800,000 or $900,000 in funding. Is that correct? No. Okay. Could you explain the?
In January of that first column that you see, which was the salary.
Press your button.
Which was the salary of the chiefs in January of 2023. That should be that first column, I believe, maybe the chart you're looking at. That's what they made before the prior board took on looking at whether to create a compensation structure. On September 28th of 2023, after 3 months of committee meetings and meetings with the chiefs and the staffs, that board adopted what is now the current compensation structure. It resulted in that increase between column 1 and column 2 at that time. The caveat was that each district would pay that out of their own funds. If they did not have those funds, they wouldn't take the increase in salary. They couldn't request additional money to supplement or pay their own salaries. So there is not an increase today in that. That occurred in 2023, okay? So our plan is simply to hold on to what's been in place for 14 months, 13 months, and to make these 5 changes. That was the committee's recommendation. The plan that's been submitted on behalf of the office, I believe, is, if you're looking at the same chart I am, is what's in chart 3. So if you look at chart 2, that's what we're spending right now. Chart 3 is what we would spend that's proposed from the
What page are you referencing when you say chart?
column. There's a chart that has 3 columns, okay? Chart 1 is what they were making before they ever got raises, the ones where they were going 12, 13 years without raises. This is what their salaries were. The middle one is what was implemented on September 28th of 2023. So that's what bumped them up. The last one is from what we got from information, or the committee got information from the staff, what it would cost under the state's proposed plan if they took, under that plan, benefit of what they could in terms of bumping their salaries for caseloads and those criteria. They're completely different criteria between the 2 plans. So this is what they're making now, column 2. This is what they would make if they...
Column 2, you're referring to the column that says Thaxton Plan, FY20.
Well, mine says current, but yours may have named it after me.
Well, there's 2 of them.
Okay.
That's the one you all gave, and the one that the office gave says Thaxton Plan, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I had a different chart. I apologize.
So I apologize as well. So what I'm getting at, make sure I understand. So the chart I'm looking at, there's 3 columns. There's one, it says board-approved compensation as of January 2023.
Before there were ever any raises.
Right, and that totals about $3.7 million.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The Thaxton plan, FY 24-25, the committee's plan, bumps that up to about 4.6 million.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a discrepancy of give or take 800,000 or 900,000.
Yes. That's the famous $1 million you always heard about, that we gave away $1 million.
So that addition, that 800,000 or 900,000, does the legislature have to fund any of that?
No.
And explain
It's
why?
paid from existing funds in the district, and if the district does not have the funds to pay the salary of the chief doesn't take a rate. That was specifically included in the pay raise that was adopted on September 28th of 2023. You don't have the money, you can't take the money, and you're the last person to go to the trough. That was made clear to the chiefs, that was made clear in all the committee meetings that we had at that time.
Didn't happen everywhere.
There were, no, sir, there were no additional requests for additional funding to pay chiefs. That's not true.
I didn't say that.
I don't understand why
You
what
said
that didn't
that
happen.
the
every-
chief would be the last to go to the trough.
Well, if someone didn't get paid as a line defender and the chief took a pay raise, we needed to know about that. I am not aware of that happening, sir.
Oh, I didn't say the defenders didn't.
So maybe you just need to tell me what you are saying, and I can maybe handle it, we can look into it.
I misunderstood your statement when you said that the chief would be the last to go to the trough. I'm just using St. Landry as an example. 100% of the money that went to St. Landry in the plan that got adopted in 23 and covered fiscal year 24 and 25, 100% of those monies went to the chief's raise. None of them went to the line defenders.
I didn't say that. I said if you had a budget in 23, 24, and that budget had enough money left in it to pay you without cutting anything else, you got paid.
Okay.
Maybe that's a better way of saying the way we proposed it to them. You couldn't make a cut to pay yourself. If you had the money to pay, and as I recall, there were 3 districts that didn't have the money. We were in the middle of the year, and I believe the total for those 3 districts that couldn't afford it was about $70,000 to pay them. And we still had funding left for the rest of the year, and our recommendation was to pay that out of the remaining DAF, or District Assistance Fund, at that time. That's my recollection of what happened and transpired during that time. There's been a lot of numbers floated back and forth. The only thing I can tell you is what was implemented 13 months ago, that's what we're still spending today. And as far as I know, that's what's in place. This other plan, I've done the best, all of us have done what we can to get the information from the staff about what it would cost if you implemented the proposal from the state public defender, and it's actually, based on the numbers they gave us, $56,000 more expensive. So there is no significant difference between the 2 plans from a money standpoint. Is there a significant difference between either plan and what was in place in 23? Yes, but that was already taken care of in 23.
What? Witness mic needs to stay on at all times? Well, they're not trying to talk.
Mr. Thompson, does that help sort of put it in those
I don't
categories?
even know what the witness mic.
Like these,
And
yeah.
I do have another question.
Sure.
Go ahead. I'm going to turn your mic on. Best I can.
I think it's on. Can you explain, I guess, the most significant differences, number one, as well as the committees or the compensation committees' primary disagreements or concerns with the office's compensation plan?
Let me tell you.
Without getting too far into the weeds, just the basic disagreements or concerns that the committee has.
Because they may see it differently than I do. The 3 main concerns I had in comparing the 2 was, number one, there were subjective criteria in the office's plan. Number 1. Number 2, there was no credit given for years of service in as a line defender, which I think is very important. in calculating the service. And number three, there was no consideration in the context of the size of the district in terms of how many cases they held. The current plan divides the districts basically into 4 categories based on how many clients they serve, and it ranks them. And there are base salaries for each of those categories. The new plan doesn't take that into account.
So those 3.
There's more than 3.
Pardon me?
Press your button, Peter. No, press it.
Testing.
Now you're on.
All right, so 3 concerns, the subjective criteria, no credit given with regard to time spent as line defender, no consideration regarding to the size. I thought there was consideration given on those 2, but maybe we can hear from Mr. Sarnes later. But what about the discrepancy as far as the reduction in pay for district defenders? So reduction in pay, right, is my primary concern for district defenders. And
I limited my comments to the differences in the plans, not the effect of the plans. The effect of the plan, to me, is the most devastating. If you look at, there was something that came out yesterday, which was basically a list of the base pay and how much that would be. Under that contention, 31 of the 37 chiefs would take a pay cut. If you look at the chart that you just referred to, the 3 columns that had the before, what we have now, and the state public defender's plan, if in that plan, 17 of the chiefs take a pay cut. And those pay cuts are as much as $59,000 a year. So if you want to talk about the effect of the plan, that deeply concerns me. If you want to just talk fundamentally about the difference in how they're structured, to me, that's a different issue. So I didn't mean to discount the economic effect on these folks. But more importantly, Mr. Thompson, I think what concerns me is this has dragged on for 4 years. And these people have been left in limbo about what was going to happen with their salary. And when this was taken on in 2023, there was a vigorous discussion. There were numerous Zoom calls. This thing was turned inside out. Everyone participated. And that board voted pretty strongly to accept this, whether you agree or you disagree. That gave them some certainty. But now it's back. And a hard battle was fought in the legislature to make sure that this board could control the compensation structure. It's the one thing that was given to this board, one of the things that was given to this board other than supervision. And the reason it was given to this board so that it would not be subjective or on a personal level. But now we're back having to look at this again. And that is the thing that concerns me the most. These people are having to live day in, day out, with repeatedly their salaries being placed in jeopardy by these plans over and over and over. I don't think any of us would be comfortable with that, so I'll close with that. But I'll defer to the 2 committee members. They may have different views of what are the main distinctions in the 2 plans.
And before anyone else speaks, let's explain now what's explained to me, that you press your button that acknowledges that you wish to speak. I then press your button, which allows you to speak.
I didn't know that.
And I know. I didn't either. Otherwise, I'd have said it from the get-go. But if you put me in charge of technology, there's going to be a screw-up every time.
You're doing good.
But that's the game plan. So if you wish to speak, you press, it turns green, and I'll turn.
And state their name.
You want, and they would like us to state our name when we speak.
Oh, Adrisha Butte. Further to your question, as far as the subjective criteria, I think it's important to note that it's multifaceted. There are several parts that fall under it, right? And this was a really kind of a big group of sub issues. One of them being local funding. Local funding was a really big point in terms of it's not available to everybody. It's not an option. And in some cases, and a lot of cases from what we saw, it's never going to be necessarily available. So that's one. The second one would be even the formula for the warrant. Again, it does not take into consideration the districts, the population, the monies that's available, and whether or not even there is any money to factor into the formula for warrants. Like it's such a varying criteria to have as a major point of consideration for your compensation that I think it just kind of, it freaked me out when I first was kind of looking at it, but also it was definitely a point of concern for the chiefs. Another one of the subjective parts too, again, is the term caseload. If you're already a chief who's already appearing in court, and let's say you have a district that's set up where you have a drug court, or I think it's termed differently in different districts, where you definitively have to show up. What's to say that this caseload, this new definition, this new term caseload, right, is that what you're already doing is going to fall into that definition? We have yet to see how caseload is being defined in the proposed plan. And in some cases, the chiefs really can't afford to take on, I don't know, 50 cases or what have you. What if the definition of caseload is like you have to have a regular load of 60 cases and be chief at the same time, and you're already taking on 30 cases and you're basically at your max? What's the definition of that? So in some, it's still questionable. Like, there are too many questions that are left in terms of what does that mean? How is it defined? And then also that final category that if you take on a caseload, you're basically rewarded. If you go to private practice, you definitely are getting extra money as well. But it's just the idea that a lot of the chiefs basically kind of felt like they would have to go into private practice, whether they could physically have the hours or the physical capability to do that, or irrespective of whether or not they even knew what that meant because they've never been in private practice. It kind of puts them in a catch-22 situation.
Anybody else? If not, I have a couple of questions to ask to make sure of something. I'm told, although I wasn't part of anything in the 23 review, that when that salary schedule, I'll call it, was put into place, that it took into effect caseloads in districts. I'm led to believe that. I think I heard Judge Thaxton say that. And my concern with that is this. I said it the very first time we looked at this in this room, that I could not believe that the caseload in the 19th JDC was greater than the caseload in St. Andrew Parish in the 27th JDC. Under the salary schedule that was put in place in 23, the 19th JDC district defender had a salary of $140,000, and in St. Andrew Parish, in the 27th judicial district, they had a salary of $155,000. Now, those two caseloads can't possibly be the same. And St. Landry, I know, after having served as a judge there for over 9 years, is not greater than the caseload in the 19th. So if caseload was taken into effect, it surely didn't come out like it was supposed to. And if we're basing our numbers on, let's look at the current versus what we should do today, maybe we need to look back at what we did in 23 to make sure that was correct. Because I cannot believe that anybody sitting on here today would think that that was right, that the 19th district defender should make more than the 27th. And now the 27th, under the committee's proposal, goes up again. Goes up from 155 to 165. And according to my count, there's only 6 district defenders who will make more than the 27th district defender under the committee's plan. We are perpetuating a problem.
No, that's, I hate
Judge.
to.
I'm looking at OSPD compensation plan fiscal year 26.
That's the
That's
office.
Mr. Starnes' proposal for the salary, not the current one. The current one doesn't go up.
Do we have your current one?
Yes.
It's right here. It's the middle column.
Current
It is the
salary.
current.
In other
fact,
words, that's what they're getting paid today.
And in fact, it goes down, number one. And I
Okay,
don't mean
wait,
to interrupt you. Go ahead.
My question is this, then. I don't understand those numbers of the OSPD compensation plan that you put out.
No.
And This is your handout today, correct?
Finish your question.
Did y'all give us this?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. Y'all gave me this. I'm only comparing it to what the office gave. The Thaxton plan and current salaries are in essence the same. And 155 is what is listed for the 27th. Now, Mr. Starnes, in his handout, says that the 27th district defender will go down to 132 under his plan. You say it'll go up to 165.
No,
No.
that's not true.
Well-
If I could respond, I want to ask you.
Please.
Two questions. Number one, caseloads were not the criteria we used. Clients served was what ranked districts with the base salary. So it was the volume of cases in each district, number one. Number two, there are 6 criteria that determines a chief's salary. 2 of those are how many years they served as a line defender. They got a bonus for that in terms of service. How many years they served as a chief. Your chief had been there, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And when he accumulated all those numbers, that's what put his salary where it was. That is an objective standard. Now, if you had an opinion about that chief, you might not have thought he deserved that salary, but that was still an objective standard. Number one, that's the definition of how that was created. Number two, that doesn't matter because he's gone. I understood no?
He's
not
still there until they hire a replacement.
Well, he's resigned. Let's put it that way. So it's sort of moot for next year. Number two, this third column that you're looking at is if you include all of the criteria that the state public defender has proposed, what he would pay in those districts. The one you're looking at from yesterday is essentially the base salary for those folks without them taking a caseload. Those numbers don't have any relevance to our discussion here today because they don't include folks taking caseloads and a number of other criteria. This is what we were given. We didn't come up with these numbers in column 3 for Mr. Starnes' plan. That was given to us by the staff. So I would suggest to you, this is the better chart, number one. Number two, caseloads. If I could finish, Judge. Number two, there are many factors, and because Mr. Lopez had been there so many years, his salary was bumped based on the objective criteria as opposed to subjective criteria of whether somebody liked him or didn't like him. And that's why his salary was where it is. But it is moot because I understand he's resigned and he'll be gone.
Well, and I don't care who's in the position. I just find it highly unusual that the district defender in the 27th would make $15,000 a year more than the district defender in the 19th.
She'd been there 1 year. And she was not, as I appreciate it, had not been a line defender or chief during that time. So you have to look at the criteria that were applicable. It was not personalities. It was objective criteria that we used. That's the answer, and I hope that answers your question.
All right. I have one more, and I perceive our function completely different, apparently, from other people on this committee. Because I believe if the legislature wanted us to do what we're doing right now, they wouldn't have changed the law. They would have left things just like they were, whereby the old board had all the powers that it had to do exactly what we're doing today. They clearly evidenced an intent to make a change. They didn't want it to stay the same. And they put in place something that was completely different. And I still do not believe that this board should be this deep into the weeds. That's why it came up with a plan to have a state public defender to do this. And guess what? That also gave accountability so that if he doesn't do it and it doesn't work, they simply get rid of him and get somebody else to get it done. I perceive this board trying to do what the old board did. And that's not, in my view, what the legislative intent was when they passed the law.
In all due respect,
But that's just
the statute
my opinion.
specifically authorizes this board to set a
You have to wait until we recognize you, okay?
Sorry.
Now you're on.
The statute specifically includes the authority of this board and the duty to set a compensation structure for the district defenders, which is exactly what we're doing. The original bill did not have that in there, and it was added by the author of the bill to basically give this board that duty specifically, along with creating this board, which was also not in the original bill, and to supervise the state public defender, also not in the bill. So we do have responsibility to address this very specific issue in the act.
I'd like to say.
Press your button, and there we go.
There we go. When
And state
Phyllis
your name.
Cady,
Thank you, Jeff.
when we first started meeting, my big concern was the the cost for the state. And I'm satisfied. I don't think $56,000 makes a big difference, but we are saving the state $56,000 through the recommendation. But I had two other concerns that became apparent during the meetings that we've had, and one of them was the threat to some of the public defenders, the chiefs who. At one meeting, it was 7 out of 10 said they were going to have to resign if their salaries were cut in so many ways. And I thought, well, the cost to the state to replace these public defenders, and I mentioned it with Mr. Stearns, I'm concerned about having to replace the public defenders because you have the years of the reason I think that they should get credit for the years of their service as line defenders or in the job itself makes them better equipped to administer the office as a chief, and also the cost of the state to have to replace them. I mean, it would take years of experience. It would take years of more continuing education. And I think we've reached some of that through the help with the Loyola University and also the help in Monroe at the school there. Focusing on some of the students that are coming through, maybe they will be better prepared, but they're not prepared to do the administration. So I think the loss of some of the current chiefs who have been there for a long time would be a great loss to the state. And I will tell you that one of the shocking things that I learned is before the salary was increased in 2023, there were a few of them. One had worked for 15 years without a raise. And I was just surprised that someone would stick to the job that long. But I learned after several of the meetings that it's just a public service to some people, and it's in their heart, and that's what they do. Just like it's just like other positions of service. So that's all I have to say.
Any other questions of the committee members? If not, we'll hear from...
Before we proceed, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the recommendation of the committee be accepted with the 5 changes that have been proposed by the committee, and make that motion this time.
I second.
Got a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Any comments? Anybody? I thought we were going to hear from the state public defender,
We did that at the last meeting, Mr. Chair.
but he didn't have an opportunity to comment on your plan.
He had the opportunity to come to the meetings, and he chose not to. And he sent representatives. So if you want to defend
But we all
that-
just got your plan today.
I've made my motion. It has a second, Mr. Chair.
It does. Any discussion from anybody?
I like the Freddie picture.
Just
Like the walk with substitute motion.
hang on, Judge. Let me get you on here. Go ahead. Now you are.
That we accept the committee's recommendation only to include number 5 with 1, 2, 3, and 4 to be left open for further consideration and further review.
I'll make sure I understand the motion. All right, so just for clarity, Judge, the recommendation has 5 bullet points.
Right.
And you're indicating that you wish to adopt
The
4 and 5?
No, just 5, the grandfather clause. And that 1, 2, 3, and 4 be left open for further consideration.
In essence, that means keep the current compensation plan in place.
Right.
Substitute motion to keep the current compensation plan in place. Do I have a second? Press your button, I'll turn you on.
Okay. So what is the substitute motion again?
Substitute motion is to keep the current salary in place. Because if you adopt simply number 5, that's what it does. No salary would be
To
cut.
keep the current salary in place, but not
Not adopt
any
1 through
motion
4.
to it, we're not on adopting the office's plan at this point.
Nope,
Okay.
that's the substitute motion.
I mean,
Hang on, he's
I
still got
think
the
we
floor.
need, I mean, I really would like to hear from the office and Mr. Starnes, reaction to the committee's recommendations and concerns. I think that's very important.
We need a second to the substitute motion before we can discuss the substitute motion, or it fails for lack of a second. Now, we can have a second and then have discussion.
I'll second.
All right, Judge DeMaye, you second?
Correct.
All right, I got a second to the substitute motion by Judge DeMaye. Now we can discuss it. Judge?
All right. As I understand the motion, this will affect only, as I understand the substitute, this will affect only the chiefs that are employed at this time. Any future chief would not be affected. The future chief would not receive the salary of the current chief necessarily. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. The executive director would be in a position to negotiate new salaries prospectively for any new employees. I see some heads shaking out there.
Is that still under the criteria of the current plan, right? That's still under the criteria of the current plan as it exists, because if you're moving to accept number 5, that just means an amendment to the current compensation plan using the current type of criteria that's being used, not moving towards the proposed one. Am I understanding that correctly?
Press your button. All right.
In my initial discussion, I indicated that the plan is a hybrid type situation whereby you're talking about the retroactivity of cutting salaries and but prospectively you're also talking about increasing salaries. I would not like to see anybody's salary cut. And that means that the current situation would be grandfathered in according to your recommendation. And that there is sufficient time before, I think, the end of the fiscal year for the plan that's being proposed by the state office to be reviewed by the subcommittee or whomever. But right now, if you're asking us to do something today, that we only decide not to cut people's salary.
Question for you, since it's your motion. Does your motion envision that we simply keep current salaries in place, but still look at adopting a compensation plan down the road? I don't understand. Which is exactly what we did at our last meeting? Or is your motion that you're okay with Mr. Storm's plan as long as it doesn't cut anybody's salary? I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, just like I said, I think that he did a lot of work in trying to put something together that makes sense as far as I'm concerned, but where we run into a problem as far as I'm concerned is that you're talking about cutting people's salary. And that part I can't go with.
I understand that. And my question to you is this. Is your motion to adopt his plan with the understanding that every salary is grandfathered in, and when that position becomes vacant, then that plan is what you use to fill it?
I would say yes.
Is your second to that still hold? All right, now we open for discussion on with a better understanding of what the motion is.
So, Mr. Thompson.
Gotcha.
So in order to consider his amended motion or his substitute motion, I would like to hear from the office. I would like to hear from Mr. Starnes. And I would like to hear his reaction to that suggestion and if that can be done in his plan, can be accomplished. I don't see how we can vote on that without hearing from Mr. Starnes.
I agree. All right.
I had one question for point of clarification, because originally when the substitute motion was proposed, I think you stated twice that recommendations 1 through 4 you wanted to keep open for further evaluation.
I'll delete that.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Starnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. I'm a little bit confused as to what exactly we're talking about here. I would like to talk about my plan and answer any questions that you have about it. As far as this plan today, I've never received a copy of it. You had the basics of my plan in June, and with plenty of opportunity to discuss it with me. I haven't seen any plan. I still haven't seen it. I know somebody gave Eric a copy of it. No one has given me a copy of it. But from what I've heard, I do have some views of it. For the plan that I came up with was really a plan that we came up with. I used to be on the Public Defender Board, the very first one. I was on the board before that, in 2006 and then 2007. Always in the statute was District Defender Compensation Plan, then to be set by the board. The board never did it. The board never did it because the board could never decide what a public defender was. They never could get over the hurdle of full-time, part-time, private practice or not, things of that nature. Always there was the basically ad hoc or random setting of a district defender salary. By 2023, there was no way anybody could look at the district defender salaries and tell one from the other, or why there was any reason for any or the other. It was simply whatever was set at the time, and it never moved. When I got to be state public defender, I think we had some minor adjustments in 1 or 2 of them, which was the first movement Summit had in decades. That was a failure of the board to come up with a plan, but the reason the board failed to come up with a plan was they never could figure out what a district public defender was. They never defined it. Again, there was different views. Some people thought it was contract only with a private practice, and others thought it could only be a full-time, no private practice employee. That vulgar approach didn't lend itself for the realities, which is that every district, just like every parish, is different. And what I've heard from the plan before, when the board plan of 2023, and what has been proposed today, is consistent with the same way that the old plans always failed, because it didn't understand that each district is unique, individual, and distinct from each other. You can't say the district defenders and here's what they should get paid. The answer is where. I've heard some discussion about the unavailability of certain resources from one district to another. That is true. And that's the kind of thing that the prior board never took into account. When I became state public defender, I started recommending to the board new public defender hires. The most difficult part of that replacement was always district defender salaries. There was simply no way to do it under any existing criteria set by the then public defender board. I'm the one that asked the board to allow me to come up with a plan, knowing that the hurdle always was policy problems. That is, full-time, part-time, private practice or not. With an absolute discounting and disregarding the realities that the district defenders are not state employees, they are not employees then of the Public Defender Board, and they're not employees of the Office of State Public Defender today. The relationship to the state has always been by contract. So in terms of salary, maybe if they're employees of the district office, they could have some type of salary. I don't use that term because they're not salaried employees of the state. So it's about compensation packages. So a little over 3 years ago, I started the process of coming up with a comprehensive plan, takes in the realities of the funding sources that we have, the individual nature of each district, each parish, and come up with ways to find the best ways to compensate district defenders. Along the way, I realized that there is no way to address this in a vacuum. It has to be part of how we fund the entire system. How much do you compensate district defenders? How much for line defenders, support staff, and the like? I've heard about people represented, caseloads. Our first attempts at funding our system, dispersing state funds in our system, was based on caseload formulas. When I was on the board, we started that process. And every year I was on the board, we amended it because it never worked. Dr. Stilling was working there at the time, just like he works for the office today. And I think he alone came up with 6 or 7 different variants of that caseload funding formula. None ever worked. So what we learned was using caseloads as a metric for resource disbursement just wasn't something that ever worked. We know why. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison. And it doesn't take into account really important things like recidivism. The existence of a prior felony totally changes the dynamic on how you represent someone who does not have that, for example. That's just one example. But it doesn't take into account the differing natures of the cases, nor the constitutional obligation under Strickland and its progeny about the individual nature in which you have to approach these cases and what the constitutional responsibilities are. So, but how do you take into account caseload? How do you take into account the people you represent, the population, available funding sources? So that's what the process was. Along the way, I asked for input from every single district defender. On my weekly Zoom call, I mentioned it countless times with them in person. And then once we came up with a plan, I visited with each of them individually and went over it with them and asked for their input. We incorporated some of it in the plan that we presented here. but I visited with every one of them, asked for their input and their questions and their concerns. I received it, we digested it, and again, considered it. So this isn't something that I came up with, it's really something that we came up with. I know that there's people who disagree with it, and I can speculate as to why. But the fundamental difference in what I am proposing as opposed to what else we've heard is this plan takes into account actual funding sources. And we are funded in a very unique way in Louisiana. Our primary funding source are the 8 statutes that we call conviction user fees. That's how the legislature primarily funds public defense. It amounts to about 35% of our system-wide expenditures. Our primary funding source, a little over 1/3 of our expenditures. Local funding is available in a lot of places, but some of it is in kind. The only real large cash amounts local governments provide to public defenders are in East Baton Rouge, Orleans parishes, and on a smaller scale in the Felicianas. So there's local funding in other places, some I'm proud of. In St. Bernard Parish, the parish provides, for example, parish employees they assign to the public defender's offices. And in Calcasieu, we now have self-generated revenue in the form of the building that the state pays rent on that the 14th uses to operate on. But other than those types of things, it is limited. But when you look into the individual nature of each parish and each district, you see why. The one judge or 2 judge districts, they have general jurisdiction courts, and those courts meet a couple times a month for criminal matters. That's fundamentally different than what happens in East Baton Rouge Parish or Orleans Parish or Caddo Parish, which have criminal-only jurisdiction courts that meet 5 days a week. So how do we quantify that? So the way we came up with was we wanted to look at all the available funding sources and the individual complex nature of the districts, taking into account all of the things that we were trying to quantify that we need to take into account: population, caseload, how you staff the court system, how you represent people in court, how to distribute resources. So that started that process. My staff and I, along with input from some defenders who chose to participate, we came up with the plan you see before you. The most important part of this is what we call de facto warrants. Warrants are how the district attorneys are funded. It's a statutory amount the legislature sets and provides. The elected district attorney gets paid one amount, the assistants get paid another, and the number of assistant district attorney warrants are set by statute. The district attorneys have their own retirement system. This is a way that the legislature can, one, ensure the solvency of that retirement system by having a tight control over the obligations in terms of the sure nature of the warrant amount and the number of warrants, so they know. We don't have a retirement system for district defenders or line defenders. So there hasn't been the impetus, the strong desire to make sure of its solvency. That led to things like warrants for the DAs. But everybody in Louisiana who deals in the criminal justice system, the judges, the district attorneys, the legislators, the governor, understand how DAs are funded by warrants. I get asked all the time, how many warrants do I need? How many warrants do you have? If the district attorney asks for more warrants, they understand that. And to be fair, they want to ask us, how many warrants do we need to balance the increase to the DAs? We don't have warrants. But what's important is we get warrants. That is the funding source of the future for the public defender system. We don't have them. We have to create them. So what we've done is we came up with what I call de facto warrants. So if we implement this plan and it works, the next step is to ask the legislature to codify it, to give us a statutory amount. But we have to start with this first. This is how you get funding in a public defender system, what we don't have now. Our biggest weakness, we do not have the reliable, renewable, sustainable funding source. We don't have it. We're trying to get one, create one, acquire one. We don't have it now. It's the lack of understanding of these funding sources and the way they work in each district, each parish, is what I think is one of the main reasons the Public Defender Board failed, is because of the failure to take into account that the state money was only supplemental and not something to be considered a primary, even though it accounts for over 50% of the expenditures in our system. We have to move towards warrants, not only for district defender compensation, but also as a base for DAF disbursement. So we need to find out how many line defenders we have statewide, how the district staff each section of court, represent all the 146,000 people per year the public defender system represents, and use that as a basis to disperse DAF, to compensate district defenders, and ultimately be able to ask the state for more money with known quantities and the number of warrants. They understand that because the DAs ask for more warrants all the time, and to be fair, they'll want to give us some too. Right now, we're in the position of DAs ask for some amount of warrant, which is an annual thing. Once you get a statutory amount, if they even get one, that's one increase of $50,000 plus benefits every single year. We don't have that. Our funding is annual. That DAF, that state general fund money, is year to year. It's why it is entirely irresponsible to obligate anybody in our system more than 1 year at a time, but we don't have the funding. We can't guarantee funding. So until we get a new funding source, then it's just not responsible to have multi-year contracts for anything. So we have here is, and I think that's something you can show, Eric. We have presented this slideshow to everyone, and these are the factors that we took into account. The experience is experience as a district defender. The conviction user fees are those 8 statutes. Local funding is as I described. A couple of them are, the majority of them are Orleans, East Baton Rouge in terms of dollar amounts. The district complexity takes into account the number of parishes and the number of sections of court that we weight. And the weighted sections of court are criminal-only jurisdiction only sections count as 2, and all other elected judges count as 1. The line defender enhancement is the 25% increase for the entirety of the district defender compensation calculation. So we set the de facto warrant amount at $60,000. The actual warrant cost, because they have a benefits package, is $70,445 per district attorney warrant. The $50,000 is how much they get in the statute. 60 is in the middle. Eric, the next one. So the plan builds from the de facto warrant, and go to the next one. It takes into account the local funding we've talked about, and show the chart. Yeah. No. Well, we'll start with that one. That's the district defender warrant amount, which is $60,000, and each of those columns is an enhancement based on experience as a district defender. It goes up pretty high. That's how the most experienced district defenders end up having pretty high compensation packages. Next.
Your mic's on.
These are the conviction user fee. This is
Starnes, I'm being told that some people can't hear you. You might want to lean in a little
I'm
bit.
sorry. These are the conviction user fee enhancements. As you can see, even from zero to the most is only $20,000. This isn't an incentive or inducement. This is an acknowledgement of the difference in a district, for example, East Baton Rouge, 19th, which has over $1 million a year in cuffs, versus a district like Plaquemines, the 25th JDC, which has very small amount of cuffs, would be in that $0 to $249,000 category. It's just it takes into account, one, the number of sections of court, the number of cases. That's a caseload acknowledgement, or takes into account. And the relative complexity too. It all, that's how it's quantified. You'll see it in cuffs. There's nothing we can do to increase that or decrease that. It is imposed by a court, collected by the sheriff. All that money is kept in each district locally. We never see it at the state level. Only the district defenders have that in their budgets. But we do get reports on it, so we know what it is, what they are. And that helps inform us on how to disperse DAF in the most efficient ways. But it also it goes straight to the district's ability to pay district defender compensation, because if you have $1 million or more in conviction user fees, then you can pay the district defender some of that money versus a district where there is no money. So it goes to the district's ability to pay. The next one. This is local. And this is what the members of the committee were talking about. It's not available everywhere. It's not available in the same ways everywhere. That's certainly true. Orleans is $10 million last year. Some places, most places, the local governing authority will give zero. They could give in-kind amounts that we can quantify. And if you get any at all, you see the district defender gets an enhancement. But in some districts, it's going to be in kind on the lower end. But the way it shakes out is the districts where it's very hard to get any local funding at all. A lot of those are the ones with 1 or 2 or 3 judges. In criminal court, only a handful of days a month. And yes, if you need to supplement your income some kind of way, then there could be a private practice. It's also the places where it makes the most sense to have a line defender enhancement, so you're actually in court representing people. So it's not the district defender in Lafayette, for example, needs to have a private practice, needs to have a line defender enhancement. I don't believe that. That's one of the jurisdictions where it's mostly administrative, supervisory. Orleans, Caddo, the ones that we would know, but it makes no sense. The districts can't support it. The funding isn't available to have districts where line defender enhancement should be something that the district defender does, to just be administrative, and then expect the state to supplement the rest of that salary from the DAF, which has to be shared among every district. And why that is so devastating is if a district can only support a salary of, I'm going to say $60,000 because of no cuffs, no local funding, and under the present plan or the proposed plan by the committee, that district defender, because of whatever factors the board that was been eliminated took into account, or this committee took into account, that salary, that compensation level is $120,000. Well, it's not coming from cuffs. It's not coming from local. It means there's only one other place, that's the state. That means DAF, what we disperse to each district, needs to be $60,000 of that is going to the district defender compensation. That means that's not going to a line defender. That's not going to Lafayette or Caddo or East Baton Rouge to hire somebody to actually represent people in court. That is a policy decision that the compensation committee, the committee is making, that to represent nobody in court, $60,000 in state should go to a district defender somewhere who doesn't represent people in court, instead of money to a district that needs another line defender. So that is reduction in services. That is a policy decision I think is an extremely poor policy decision. And when you multiply that one example times the state of Louisiana, all 64 parishes, all 42 judicial districts, it results in a massive, inefficient distribution of state resources that threatens the solvency and the ability of the system, and is a strong impediment to actually representing people in court, providing the constitutional services we're required to provide. And I hear all the time from district defenders and others, I need more line defenders. We're trying to get you line defenders. The way to get more line defenders is to be able to recruit and retain them. And the way to do that is to resource people in the courtrooms. In other words, district defenders who are representing people in court in districts where that makes sense, and getting district defenders more resources to hire line defenders and to keep line defenders to represent people in court, because we're not inefficiently distributing that to district defenders who don't represent people in court. Now, lest you think I'm picking on district defenders who don't represent people in court, the places where that makes the most sense are also the places where there's most likely to be able to get local funding. So Orleans Parish, for example, East Baton Rouge Parish, for example, which get the most local funding, I don't expect that the district defenders in those places should have a private practice. I shouldn't think that they would necessarily need a district defender, line defender enhancement by actually representing people in court. They could, but they may not need to. Unlike the CUFS numbers, which are an acknowledgement, the local funding enhancement numbers jump up quickly and are pretty large. That is an incentive. That is, we're trying to incentivize district defenders working with local governments, decision makers, to get local funding. One example of that is what we're calling local funding, we take a very liberal definition of that, is the self-generated revenue, for example, in Calcasieu Parish. That's not state funding. That's not CUFS money. That's money the state pays in rent to the district defender's office in Calcasieu Parish. And that counts as local funding for district defender compensation enhancement. Now, does it matter whether that district defender or the prior district defender got that enhancement, got that advantage, those resources? I don't think so, because what it goes to is that district's ability to sustain itself and pay. You making the state portion, the DAF, truly supplemental. Now, all of these calculations are based on the existing funding sources. A fundamental difference between the committee's recommendation, which doesn't consider funding sources at all. And if we take into account the actual funding sources, make it and officially distribute it, it's my belief that's the way we can show the legislature and the governor that we can codify this disbursement mechanism and this compensation plan as a way of getting actual warrants, getting more warrants going in the future as a way of stable funding from the state for the public defender system. We can't do that if we don't start now with de facto warrants, which is necessary and a basic pillar of my compensation plan. Yes. Now, the complexity factor, this is what we were talking about. You see this chart here? This is weighted sections of court in the first column, and it increases by the number of parishes. So obviously the rural one parish district that has one elected judge We don't give an enhancement for that, but there's no extra money to pay for a defender. That's likely a place where there needs to be a contract lawyer or two. That's going to be court once half a day a week for criminal court, half a day a week, a jury term every 3 months. Not a lot of jury trials happen for public defenders in these places. Now, each is different. I know in some parishes, Wynn Parish is a rural one-judge parish, and they're in criminal court a lot. Others, not as much. But it's different than a 3-parish district that, when you look at the number of elected judges with criminal-only jurisdiction, well, it's not multi-parish, but the criminal jurisdiction, like in Caddo or East Baton Rouge and in Orleans, you get pretty quickly to the 23-plus sections of court. Those are districts that can sustain, have the funding to sustain more compensation to district defenders. We cap them. We cap the district defender compensation at the same rate as a district judge. I think it causes too many problems politically if the district defender makes more than a district judge. So we cap them at the district judge's salary amount. That's roughly what the 167 comes down to. I don't know exactly what the district judge's compensation, but we put 167. But the real answer is capped at whatever the district judge's compensation package is. In the column, in that 3-column sheet that y'all have, that you've seen, the numbers in the 3rd column, our plan, do not count any 25% enhancement for being a line defender. That's something that we need to work out individually with the district defender, whether they want to do that or not, and what the caseload would look like. Here's and there's been some questions about the subjective nature of that. Here's how we're going to do that. I've asked my deputy, Mike Mitchell, we're going to all meet with him, but he's going to spearhead this, to meet with each of them about what caseload they have. And the only standard I gave him to measure whether it qualifies or not is if you take this caseload, the caseload has to be something you would have had to hire somebody for if you didn't do it. So if you get the 25% enhancement, sure, we're paying you a premium, but it means you're doing the work of what otherwise would be a line defender. So you are, in fact, a line defender yourself with district defender responsibilities. And lest you think this is some back-breaking work, these would most apply in districts where they're only, like I said, in court, maybe a day a week or half a day a week in some cases, 1 or 2 times a month in some of these areas. So this isn't the situation where you're in criminal court 5 days a week. That's not going to be that situation. If you would have hired somebody to do it, and you're doing instead, that's going to count 25% enhancement. The advantage the district defenders have is, as district defenders, they get to basically select the caseload that they want. So they can create their own and lessen the burden on everybody else. Mike, of course, like I said, is going to oversee that process. So rather than looking at district defender compensation in a vacuum, it fits more closely with the whole compensation package among all the public defenders. So, so the multi-district chiefs, the way we have a district defender in the 7th and the 28th, the 30th and 36th, the 14th and the 38th, the 11th, 39th, and 42nd is one district defender. And the way we do that is by using the same charts and ranges that we've had for the one district chiefs, we add. So you add the experience which is going to jump up the enhancement pretty quickly because you're getting 2 for 1 every year. You add the cuffs to see if you can get into the next range. You add any local money. And the complexity, you add the number of parishes and you add the number of sections of court to get to that enhancement. that works out extremely well as we play with the hypotheticals of it. We've always wondered, well, if you're the district chief in the 14th, and then you take on the 38th, Cameron, how do you really quantify that? This does a good job of quantifying that. It makes it more cost-effective in areas where it works. And so I'm very proud of how that works out with multi-district chiefs. What's the next one? These are examples under this plan that my staff came up with. For example, this hypothetical defender has been a chief for 5 years. The district has $1 million in cuffs, $250,000 in local funding, 13 weighted sections in a one parish district, does not take the line defender enhancement. When you look at that district and that chief, it comes out to $123,000 in sum as compensation. The next one is a 20-year district defender in a very rural area, $300,000 in cuffs, no local funding, 3 weighted sections in a 3-parish district, but they had the line defender enhancement. They also make about $123,000. So even the rural areas, even that they don't have, for example, a large amount of cuffs and local funding, that's an area where being a line defender makes more sense, and they still make a decent amount of money. There's no prohibition on private practice. Once again, these people are not our employees. I don't think we should be in the business of telling them whether to have or not have a private practice, as long as they're meeting their obligations to the public defender system by the terms of their contract. They want to do something with their law license, they can. It's up to them. That was an improvement over the last, with the old board, the board that was eliminated, which constantly wanted to find out, set rules about whether they could or could not have a private practice. I don't think that's a role for our system at all. These people are not our employees. So we shouldn't be in the business of doing that. The other thing is, while the new statute does give the Oversight Board authority over compensation, I think that policy decisions, things that infringe in the policy areas, are ultra-virus actions, would be an ultra-virus action of the board if the board were to, again, try to impact policy in that way. And I'm talking about multi-year contracts, things of that nature, which I find to be, again, since our funding is not guaranteed but year to year, it would be very irresponsible, in my view, to create obligations that go past year to year.
Mr. Starnes, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
The substitute motion on the floor is basically to adopt your plan with the understanding that there would be no cuts in salary whatsoever.
Judge Pitcher, if I may, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that's Judge Pitcher's motion.
Let's get him to clarify it, because that's what I understood. Press your button, please. Go ahead.
My substitute motion was to, and this is a substitute motion from the subcommittee's report.
Correct.
And recommendation, is that we accept the recommendation number 5, and 1 through 4 we defer for further consideration.
You took that out, because she asked you about that, and you took it out.
I'm putting it back in.
If I may, just so that I understand, is the motion
Hang on.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead.
It's read. Judge Pitcher, is the motion to accept the recommendation to continue the current plan with number 5 included, but to defer 1 through 4 for later discussion? That's what I understood your original. Is that your motion?
Yes.
All right.
Well, it's changed a couple of times, so let me ask Judge DeMaye, who seconded it, to...
Good?
You good? Second. All right.
You good with that?
I want to make sure.
Good reason. You good?
And there was a purpose of me trying to find that out, and the reason was this. that, because I understood that it kind of morphed into adopting the office's plan without a reduction, and what I was looking at was if we did that, and everybody within that, all current district defenders, if they were to opt into being a line defender and whatnot, then there was some increases that they would get, and my rough math would be that would be add about $350,000 to the budget
Yes,
if that were to happen without any other reductions to offset them. So I just wanted a clarification before we went that route. All right. Then let me ask you this question. If the motion is to, as stated, with no reduction and to look further at the other recommendations, what is your position?
I think that is extraordinarily poor public policy. I think it's outside the statutory authority given to the Oversight Board, and I think it is an example of the reasons why the legislature may have eliminated the past board.
Mr. Chair, if I could, number one.
You're still on.
Thank you. The Act specifically provides that the contract may be entered with the district chief for up to 5 years. That is in the Act, number one.
Wait, it can go up to 5.
Yes, sir.
No question.
And that's why that was included in the recommendation. We didn't pick that number out of the blue. That is in the statute, number one. Number two, I don't believe it serves any purpose to disparage any past board or board member and what they did or didn't do. Mr. Starnes is the common denominator in the past. But that having been said, as I understand the motion, and it is seconded, I would call the question.
Question has been called. Roll call vote on the substitute motion.
Any more questions? Discussion?
Question's been called.
Okay. So could
Go ahead.
just clarify the substitute motion? I thought it was a substitute motion to adopt the office's plan.
I did too originally.
Okay, with the grandfathering in
Well-
per number 5.
No, it got restated.
Several
and
times.
I inadvertently acquiesced to it, but my.
Hang
it
on,
was-
hang on. You're not on. All right.
It was the recommendation of the subcommittee that I was doing a substitute motion to, not to Mr. Starnes' plan, because it was not on the floor at the time. The only thing that was on the floor,
Well, the substitute motion could be to adopt anything. It's simply a substitute to adopting their plan.
Right.
Your substitute can be to whatever you want it to be.
right, well, this,
So under the rules of order.
Hang on. Press. All right, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Thompson. So under the rules of order, would I or another member now be allowed to make another substitute motion, which is to adopt the office's plan with the condition that number 5 also be implemented? Basically, that the chief's salaries are grandfathered in without a reduction.
Well, there was a motion for question. It can be challenged if there's sufficient number on here who are not ready to vote. And I don't know that without asking.
I'd call for the vote.
All right, a vote on the call for question. All in favor of ending discussion and voting without any further discussion or substitute motions? Roll call. This is only on a call for question to end discussion and vote.
Chairman, roll call, public record.
It's roll call. Yeah, that's what she's doing right now. Oh, your mic.
I'm sorry.
Yep, sorry. Say mic next time.
Okay. Ms. Boutte?
In favor.
Demahe? Mr. Judge Demahe? Judge Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Just to end discussion and make a vote.
Okay. Judge Katie?
In favor.
Okay.
That's our motion.
Pritchard?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Judge Thaxton?
Motion carries.
Okay.
All right. We will now vote on the substitute motion. Is everyone clear on what the substitute motion is? All right. Nobody has any
Well,
questions?
Let's,
And I'm going to restate it, and Judge Pitcher, please correct me if I'm wrong. The substitute motion was to adopt the committee's recommendations insofar as number 5 is concerned, that being that the current chief's salaries are grandfathered in without a reduction, and to further consider later down the road bullet points 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is that correct?
Correct.
right, but where does that leave us on the compensation, the overall compensation plan, the one recommended by the subcommittee and the one recommended by the office, Mr. Starnes?
There's none. There'll be none on the table if we adopt that motion. That motion does not adopt the plan, any plan.
Mr. Chair, may I, Mr. Chair?
We're discussing again. I thought we just voted not to discuss.
I'm trying to make sure we understand the motion, and Judge Pitcher, I'll defer to you. My understanding is the recommendation of the committee is to adopt the current plan with those 5 amendments. Judge Pitcher, as I understand it, motion was to adopt the plan only with amendment number 5, deferring the other 4 amendments for further discussion. Judge Pitcher?
Correct. The subcommittee made a
Hang
recommendation.
on, I got to get you on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The subcommittee made a recommendation with 5 bullet points. I offered a substitute motion that we accept number 5 and defer for further consideration 1 through 4.
I understand, but I'm going to read to you all what we all have in our hands. It is the unanimous recommendation of the committee that in order to provide for stability and continuity of the financial security of the chiefs and remove any subjective criteria, that the current district public defender's compensation structure be adopted by this board. The current, meaning the one that is currently in place, be adopted by this board with consideration of the following modifications. And then there were 5. Judge Pitcher, as I appreciate your motion, is to do exactly that, adopt the current compensation plan, but only with number 5, bullet point number 5, and deferring 1 through 4 for further consideration at a later date. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, roll call vote.
Okay, Ms. Boutte?
Is your mic on?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank
Mike?
Okay. Ms. Boutte?
you. In favor.
Okay. Judge DeMahe?
All right.
Judge Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Judge Katie?
Yes.
Freddie Pitcher?
Yes.
Peter Thompson?
No.
Judge Thaxton?
Yes.
Okay. That carries it.
Record my vote as no. All right, that carries the motion. That concludes the business of this board. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We're done.